Oh, sorry, I had to do this.
A little jealous.
All right. So first of all, cheers. Nice. We're recording on a Sunday, so we can drink in the middle of the day, so that's good.
It's a Saturday.
That's what I meant. Stop correcting me.
Well, you know the Jews got the days all screwed up, so.
With that, so once again, we have Paul with us. Paul's been with us in the fast, and he's visiting, and he's assisting. He assisted with our dignity protection class, and
a security detail while he was here.
Yeah, we're putting to might as well. If he's already here, we're gonna and
I
we expose
some pellets.
I appreciated his presence.
And exposing his pretty face to as many people as we can.
It's my gift.
Yes,
It's my duty. More importantly.
So we have Paul, and we decided we're gonna actually include him with this podcast. So last week, by myself again, because Steve keeps standing me up, pretending he's.
I'm not standing you up. I'm busy covering for you because you're too busy taking over the world because you're a narcissist.
I am a narcissist. You did go to I don't know, where did you go to for Easter? You went away, Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach.
So, anyways, but yeah, we talked about narcissism, and it's funny. I was telling Paul earlier, I don't think that podcast got the most amount of downloads that we had, but it got the most amount of shares that we had. People were posting it on their social media and sharing with other people. So, on some level, good or bad, it resonated, and I think people understood the idea that narcissism, using the right sense, equals self-worth, right? And understanding what you bring to the table and how you need to have that belief in yourself, right, in order to succeed and keep pushing forward. And I think that's the point we're trying to drive across. So with that said, we decided we're going to take it to the next step and discuss leadership today. And I'm gonna link a podcast we did in the past. Actually, Paul was sitting on that one as well, where we had a guest, Brian, who was talking about leadership skills and what he does in terms of training corporations. And we talked about bringing our military and law enforcement backgrounds, and that affects a lot of our leadership, I guess, attitude, skills, and approaches. And one of the things that Steve, you and I and Paul discussed in advance is, where does leadership training actually begin? When does one start honing those skills that they carry with them for the rest of their lives in terms of how to interact with others and how to lead teams, big or small? And it starts at home, right? It starts at a young age. We mimic and we try to mirror those around us, right? So parental figures and so forth. What would you think?
Well, let me backtrack for a second, because I'll be honest. When you made that podcast, I didn't know what you were going to talk about, and you talked about narcissism, right? Which for the most part has a negative connotation sometimes. But as you said, when it's used properly, right? Using your powers of evil for good kind of thing. And it made me think, and we talked about when did leadership start? And I know mine started at a very young age, but it was a matter of survival. And I realized I had to become a narcissist in order to survive. And when I really broke it down, because I'll be honest, I was like, I don't know about narcissism. You can't have empathy, this and that. And that's my whole thing now, right? I love peer counseling, this and that. You got to care for others. But then I understood where you were coming from with it. And when I thought about it, how far back it goes, I was like, holy crap, I had to become a narcissist, one, in order to survive. And that started ingraining that leadership quality in me. Everything from surviving the crime-ridden streets of the neighborhood I grew up, looking out for others, the whole banding together of friends and, hey, something's about to happen. This is what we have to do, all that I realized was a buildup and a forming, and then when I got into the Marine Corps, they started fine-tuning that, because it was obviously a jumbled mess. But you really made me think about that with that last podcast. And I think we all came into agreement earlier today. Yeah, it definitely starts at a very young age, obviously parental influence. But for me, because I didn't have really parents in the picture, it was growing up on the streets influence, it was a matter of survival. And then I was like, that's when it hit me. Like, I had to be a narcissist in order to survive. So,
and it's funny. And I mentioned in the podcast that I found it interesting when I discovered that everybody on my team was essentially on a scale, right, by diagnosed with narcissism. And I mentioned at the end of my podcast that most of my friends are narcissists, right? And they deserve it. They think they're the shit, and for the most part, they are, right? So, going out with Paul, it's hard. He's like, I'm the most humble guy at the table. And him saying that shows your level of narcissism.
Well, and define narcissism.
Well, for the, you're right. And it was hard to find a proper definition, right? So
Well, I have one pulled up because I knew this question was going to come up. So
I will say that when we do go out with Paul, he is typically the prettiest guy around. And so he did earn that title.
Well, we all have our cross to bear.
As it's written in whatever the King James Bible version, dictionary, whatever it may be, narcissism, personality qualities, including thinking very highly of oneself. That's Paul.
And that is positive.
Needing admiration. Definitely Paul. Believing others are inferior. Paul. And lacking empathy for others. Paul.
And again, but I would put that on a scale, right? All four of those. And the idea is that thinking highly of yourself, that's a positive attribute. Person cannot be driven and cannot accomplish great things in life without a certain sense of self-worth. If I thought I am not good enough, I wouldn't even try doing half the stuff that I did. But having that sense of, if you can do it, I can do it, and I can do it better, certainly drive you to accomplish bigger, better things than the ordinary individual.
Well, if you were to take those four definitions or elements, if you will, and remove the last three, what would that be described as? What word would that define?
Sorry, so repeat that again.
Thinking a lot of yourself. If you were to take the other three definitions about thinking you're better than others,
egocentric.
No, if you just think a lot of yourself, could that not be narcissism alone, or would that be another word?
Yeah, no, I think all of them define narcissism. Each one of them on their own could be defined narcissism.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, to the point I think I was trying to make last week, and now we're building into this week, is the idea that you need that sense of. I keep saying self-worth, and I'm repeating myself, but the idea is that narcissism, in a sense, is a somewhat inflated sense of self-worth, but as long as it's not down to an extreme to where it hinders on others people's safety and well-being,
correct,
I think it's healthy. I think it's good.
That's when it becomes, the disorder. And because you think about it, like for someone like me, I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York. So tons and millions of people, trying to make it out. And when you read the definition of a narcissist, you have to become a narcissist in order to make it. You got to become a narcissist in order to make it out of there. And, because if not, you're going to become, I hate the term using it, but you become a product of your environment. You're going to get stuck, unless you want to be there. But if you just want to settle for, what it is, then you're not a narcissist. You want more. You want to,
and I will argue that the people that do stay in that environment and flourish in that environment, right, automatically we're going to thinking about, kingpins and the leaders of crime organizations and gang and so forth. They're narcissists. For them to reach that level within the organization, they have to maintain a certain level of narcissism, or otherwise they won't be able to get there.
I mean, we could have used a better example, like, the president, the vice president, but whatever, I'll go with King.
I was going to your point about people that choose to stay there, even because you said narcissists will try to get out of there, right, and make something better of themselves. Even those that choose to stay, if they rise to a certain level, there's still narcissism involved. I think narcissism,
because at that point now they're using what they've created to gain more.
Yeah, but I think it's because they believe so highly of themselves, and again, I think drive. I think every person that achieved anything great, right? And look at all the big tech company, look at great military leaders, they had to have a certain sense of I can do it regardless, or oftentimes in spite of what people thought of them. And in order to do that, you need narcissism. You have to have that sense of self.
But do you think someone's born a narcissist, or is that a quality that can be developed?
You can ask that about any personality trait. It's a combination always.
Yeah, I definitely a combination, but you hit the nail on the head. There has to be narcissism, but more importantly, you have to be able to control it, right? Powers of evil for good kind of thing. And you think about like Caesars, right? They always had a person whispering in their ear, what? You guys know?
You're the best. You're the best.
No. Most Caesars
That's what I would say.
this person's job was one job, and it was to whisper a phrase in their ear regularly when their narcissism started getting out of control. You guys know?
Well,
It
obviously
was,
we don't.
yeah, because
Mind your business, something like that.
no, it's you're only
You too, Brutus.
you're
what?
only
Hey,
a
too,
man.
Brute.
You're
You're only a man. Oh,
So it put that in check, like you said, and let them stay within that realm of not becoming, this ferocious dictator, which some did,
Yeah, it didn't seem to really curb some of that.
Yeah. So some of them didn't have that, they didn't have their consigliere, whispering in their ear. Some just said, F it, I'm the greatest, I am God. And obviously we know many of them fell. But when you keep it in check and use it appropriately, like you mentioned earlier, you're going to achieve great things because you're building yourself, you're believing in yourself, and you should. I know I'm definitely, especially when you brought it up, I definitely have those narcissistic traits where I see something and I'm like, I can definitely do that better. And you know what?
you do that all the time.
Huh?
You do that all the time, and oftentimes you can sincerely do that better. Like when we see anything from a tactic to freaking woodwork, and
Yeah.
you look at it and you're like, I can make that better. And again, it's a well-deserved narcissism because then you go ahead and you actually do it. If you can deliver
Correct.
on what you're saying, then I think that makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, if you can walk the walk and talk the talk, or talk the talk and walk the walk.
Exactly. Hold on, I gotta have a sip of beer.
Either one. Well, what point does that transition into being a positive thing? I'll say positive. Bless you. But narcissism, in terms of what leadership, typically the oldest child has a bit more confidence than the other two, particularly if there's a single parent situation or something like that. Like you said, Stephen, I kind of thrust into it. They have to thrust repeatedly. But they now have to step up, or many of them, it may be a choice, it may not, but whatever the degree reason is, a lot of firstborn, of which I'm the firstborn, there tends to be I have a flock that I have to shepherd. And that you look at leadership starting at a young age. If you're just and the tribe that BK has, his oldest, it's interesting from an outsider standpoint just to see the hierarchy, if you use that word, about having one child significantly older than their siblings, just take that more parental kind of role, leadership role. And not that she has to do it. And sometimes it comes more naturally than others, but it's unique. I think it's something that just happens organically in a family setting, whether it be traditional or non-traditional.
Right. So to the point we were making earlier, leadership skills, although I would argue that the three of us probably developed most of it in the military and law enforcement and so forth, certainly starts a lot younger. It's funny, I have never thought of myself as a leader, but now that you mention it, I am the firstborn, and there's certainly been situations where my parents are like, we're out, you're in charge of your siblings. Mm-hmm. And that automatically puts you in that position, right? So as you said, you thrusted into it, and then you gotta figure it out. You gotta navigate it, and you already start learning how to manage personalities as a kid, right? My younger siblings, my sister and my brother, two completely different individuals, and I had to deal with both of them in different manners. So it's interesting how that happens, right? So, kind of reeling it back into the whole idea of leadership. Steve, you and I had the opportunity to actually start presenting on the topic, and it's something that we're doing more of, is teaching leadership. Mm-hmm. And we're basing it greatly off of lessons learned from Israeli military, specifically special operations community. But, like everything else we do at Masada and Silver Savages, it's a hybrid between what I bring to the table and what you bring to the table. And I want to go over some of those principles. I don't know that we covered them all today. But the first one, which I think always kind of, I guess, makes people question some beliefs, is the whole idea of leading from the front or leading from within, right? We hear that saying all the time, I lead for the front, I lead for the front. A leader is in the front, right? A manager is a slave driver from the back, right? So forth. And I'm a big believer, at least, of it's not always leading from the front. More often than not, it's leading from within. And what I mean by that is, as a leader, I should not just tell you what to do and not even lead by example, right? I should literally be there doing it with you. I think this past week was a great example. It would have been very easy for me as a leader of an organization with as busy of a week as it was to just delegate a lot of it, right? I did my time. I taught these classes in the past and so forth. I can ask you, Mike, Paul, whatever, to teach a lot more, but
I would have
instead,
said no.
you wouldn't have said no. That's the thing. You would have said yes, and you would have been there. And you actually were there because I could not be at two places at the same time. So while I was teaching dignitary protection, you were covering my classes. But the
Mhm.
fact is that it's not like I was sitting at home doing nothing. It's not I was like, okay, I taught this class in the past, so I showed you an example. Now you do it. It's I'm still there doing with you, with Michael, with Allison, whoever. I'm doing everything with you guys, and not to toot my own horn. I think that's
But that's a
a quality.
narcissist. So you are tooting your own horn.
I am a narcissist, and I'm okay with that. But the bottom line is, it's a trait that was ingrained in me in the military, right? An example I always use if I wanted to explain to people what I mean. If you are going on a race with a friend, and your friend is a significantly better runner than you, would you prefer them running ahead, finishing the race, and then maybe clapping from the sideline, or would you rather them run alongside you, hand on your back, pushing you forward? Which one would make a better leader, right? And I would argue that the person next to you, pushing you, encouraging you, doing it with you, is a better example, a better leader than the one that, look, I could do it and you can do it too. Because I think that even leading from the front creates a level of separation between you and the troops. And that separation may be seen as a hindrance or sometimes an obstacle in teams.
That example you just gave, you look at I think it could be also said the opposite, to where you look at what's the goal? How can we all help each other with our strengths and the weaknesses that we have, so to speak? But if you were to send the leader on forward, because that is more mission accomplishment, as long as everyone feels as though they're doing their part and they feel supported, who gets the accolades, who finishes it? I mean, I think it could be very arguable. The leadership, like you said, he's going to, no, I'm going to stay back and I'm going to help. But you could also have a scenario where it'd be the exact opposite.
I agree 100%. And you're right. It's always going to be mission driven. But the bottom line is, one of the things as a leader that I'm going to do is I cannot do everything at the same time, right? So if the mission requires someone to run ahead and someone doing something else, you play to your team's strengths. And at that point, if the leader is a faster runner, maybe they should run ahead. But all else being equal, from a motivational standpoint, what would get you as a troop to give your best effort?
Well,
right?
and go ahead. I'm just reinforcing what you're saying now, BK. And you guys have seen it. Like, there was a couple of officers that I used to supervise and I trained. And you saw their reaction when they saw me. It wasn't like, here's that a-hole, this and that. They showed me a lot of love, a lot of respect, because I actually attributed those same exact principles that we're talking about, right? Leading from within. Even as a sergeant, sergeants are not required, a patrol sergeant, when I was in law enforcement, are not required to answer calls and stuff like that. Their job are to fill out the schedule, sign the OT forms, fill out this form, fill out that form, et cetera, et cetera. But when I knew that there was an inundation of calls coming in, I picked up calls. I said, radio, send me that call. I'll take care of it. Radio, send me that call. I'll take care of it. When officers were stuck in the hospital, I'd show up. Hey, go take a break. Go get something to eat. I'll sit here. I'll deal with it. I was very present, but I never micromanaged. And I showed up and I made sure these officers knew that I'm here as an officer first. If you need a sergeant, let me know and I'll act as a sergeant, but I'm here as an officer. So that I saw the fruits of that. I saw a lot of my officers, I sat them down. What are your goals? All right, I'm going to help you achieve those goals. I'm going to hold you accountable, though. If you tell me you want to be a narcotics detective, in the next 2 weeks, I want a list of schools you want to go to, and I'm going to fight tooth and nail to get you into those schools. So it was like Paul said, there's a back and forth, a twist, right? Like, yes, I'm going to lead from within, but I'm also going to hold you accountable as well, to hold me accountable and to continue to grow.
Listen, there's no doubt that a leader has a lot more responsibilities than the troop, right? The troop maybe have one job to do, where you have multiple jobs to do, and you have the bigger picture to look down. So you can't do everything at all times. But how many leaders have you seen that kind of rest on their old experiences and say, I've done that. That's why I can tell you to do it. All right. Or people would say, I would never ask someone to do something I wouldn't do myself. Yeah. They may have done it 20 years ago, but they don't do it anymore. Right. And that becomes a problem, because you're losing A, integrity, but B, the respect of the troop
Right.
because they hear you say one thing, but you're not demonstrating that same trait or that same quality.
Right.
And
It's it's funny because I went through a leadership course with the community college for the police department prior to becoming a sergeant. And there were other supervisors in there, and the instructor had asked, what is our meaning of leadership? Right. And everyone gave the typical answers, setting the example, motivating the troops, blah, blah, blah. I was the last one. And I stood up and I said, sacrifice. And everyone looked at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And the instructor was like, could you elaborate? Because everyone obviously seems to be confused. I said, well, when I made the conscious decision to become a supervisor, that means I'm not getting the awards anymore. I'm not getting the accolades, although I want them. That now it's going to be in the form of my troops respecting me, following me. That's where I get that narcissistic affirmation, right? When I get the troops saying, I'll follow you anywhere, Sarge. I'll do anything you need me to do. But at that point, I knew that I'm not taking the credit for anything. I'm going to make sure my troops get it. Just like when I was due, for an example, I was due for a new patrol vehicle. And I looked at my lieutenant. I said, don't give it to me. Give it to one of the officers that have an older vehicle that's not running well, because I don't need it. I'm not running calls. It's like, I'll take the broken car. I'm willing to do that as long as I can get to and from work. Little things like that, and in turn, in that narcissistic sense, it was the troops saying, damn, he's a good sergeant. I want to work for him, and that's where that, the narcissism comes in, where I'm like, I can look back and I know a lot of my troops are like, dude, I'll work with you any day. When I was getting medically retired, I got nothing but positive emails and text messages saying, why you're leaving us, Sarge, we need you. You're the only one who fights for us, blah, blah, blah. So, for me, it was that sacrifice,
But you look at true leadership is not something you can't teach it.
Mm-mm.
You can enhance it and you can help mold certain things, but you can't teach somebody to have that mindset that you did about putting others first. And your job as a supervisor is to make sure that your subordinates have what they need. And I don't want to use the word happy, but they need to have all of the equipment that they need, training, putting, like you said, I've worked for several instances where if somebody found out you were wanting to transfer to a different division, they would make it difficult for you instead of helping you do it. And that comes down to the supervisor as an individual, not the organization as a whole. And again, you can't teach somebody to not be a jerk.
Which is funny you bring that up. And BK, this. I've had a lot of struggles with leadership in my past law enforcement experience. And I had a supervisor above me who would basically counsel me and chastise me because I was encouraging troops to transfer out and leave, to become detectives, to go into specialized units. And I was getting a speech, you're making all our good people leave. And I'm like, good, we'll get new people. And if they're not good, I'll make them good. And then I'll keep pushing them forward.
Arguably the biggest job, I would say, or the biggest task of a leader is to make other leaders. And if we do our job right, we're successful at it, right? I am probably my proudest is you came with some traits already from military and law enforcement, but me forcing you to become a director, me forcing you to become a manager, because you did not want it, and I did not. I was relentless, and you're doing it, and you're doing a very good job at it, and that I would say that's my success in a sense, being able to do that.
I'm going to narcissism kicking in,
and I'm okay with that. You know what? I do not believe in true altruism. I think there's a narcissistic, flavor to any altruistic act. That there is no such thing as I'm just doing it for the good of my heart. I'm doing it because ultimately, even if my reward is just other people thinking more highly of me, that is still narcissistic. But that aside,
well, I will reinforce what you're saying, because for me, it's a little even more now, more so now, because I got retired from the police department. And in my head, I'm like, I'm retired. I could kick back, smoke a doobie, drink a beer, and, stare at the stars and howl at the moon. But you're like, no, you've got a lot of traits. You've got a lot of training. You've got a lot of knowledge that's going to go to waste if you sit there and do that. And you need to stay in the fight, and that's kind of
that discussion with Paul earlier.
Was that?
Yeah.
I told Paul the same thing earlier.
Yeah. And you make me realize that, I've had a rough week. I'm walking with a cane today, and I'm like, I'm hurting. I'm trying to get back in the fight because I know we got another busy week next week. and I want to throw in the towel. And then what happens when I show up to Masada today, right? You're doing a test.
Steve, you need to
Jump on the floor.
Steve, you need to demonstrate this skill for me.
Yeah, you know. And what do? I get right
Do
up, lift my ass onto the mat, and I do it. You know, but that's the narcissistic trait in me. You know, like, all right, there's one of our people needs to learn. I want to make sure they know it right. I need to do that and show them right
because I know it better.
Yes,
because I can do it
I know it better, and I don't want to see them fail. I want to see them pass this test and get promoted. And as a prime example with that, you know, that's where that narcissism can, I don't want to say be bad, but you know, I struggle with my back and my knee and shit like that.
But you're hurting yourself. You're not hurting others.
Correct.
That's the difference. Narcissistic is bad when you hurt others.
Yes,
when you hurt yourself.
That's I call it the sacrificial lamb mentality, and I actually talked to this with Serena, my counselor. You know, it's a theory that I've made up, and I know you have it, BK. Paul, I know you have it too. Most people that are in a service oriented type environment, whether police, military, and stuff like that, have that sacrificial lamb mentality because we're willing to go out onto the front line and sacrifice ourselves for the perfect stranger. That's what we do, you know. But that's what that is. I'm like, you know what? I'm already broken. All right, so I'm going to make sure you know this, right? So you don't get broken like me. You know, I'm going to keep pushing until I can't push anymore. You know, and when I think at all this, it is narcissism.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the trait about, you know, putting yourself out there. All of us have lost brothers and sisters in, you know, our lines of work. And it's not so much just, at least in my opinion, the loss as much as is the regret that we couldn't replace them with us. And I think that's very notable. It's like, oh, you know, we would all happily, you know, switch places with them because you look at everything that their family and it's like, no, I don't want to let anybody down. And if I have to be the one to make the sacrifice to do so, then we would all happily do it. Again, you can't teach that.
It's what they say, right? Most people wish they weren't on their planes on 9/11. We wish that we were, right? That's the difference.
Yeah.
And again, because not to keep going in circles over the same topic, but I think I could have managed it better, could have handled it better. And, you know, there's that narcissistic attitude in a positive manner because I could help with that attitude. But to your point, as far as leadership is concerned, right? And we talk about leading from within. I mean, the whole idea of I want to be able to do it with you. I want to show you how to do it. And I want to keep doing it with you for as long as my body allows me, right? Obviously, there's going to come a time where I can't. There's just some skills that I'm going to grow out of because I'm aging, man. I can't run and gun with 18-year-olds like I used to. But I'll be damned if I won't be on the mat as much as I could, be on the range as much as I could, and still run a business to the best of my ability. And I think with the organizations that we've been dealing and working with, they're so hooked on the lead from the front mentality that they lose the idea or the vision of how to build other leaders by being there with them in the trenches and helping them solve problems and work their way out of it, you know. And I think that is probably the biggest lesson that I can, if I work with any leader right now doing consulting or whatnot, it's first of all is stop leading from the front. Go and do that with them. As a manager, I need to know how everything works. I don't know how to make a website, but I ask Mike and Allison on a regular basis to explain to me what they're doing and why they're doing it that way, right? I don't know, you know, everything that you know, but I'll be there and I'll ask you questions and I'll ask you to teach me so I can do it as well, right? And there's stuff that I do, obviously, that you're not as versed in, or Mike or Allison or anybody else that works with us, and I'll do it with you. I mean, and I think that's what leadership comes down to, doing it with the troop, not separated from the troops.
And you know, it's funny, you know, Paul, you were a crayon eater and so was I. And in the history of the Marine Corps, you know, we have the red stripe on our pants, the blood stripe, which once you reach the rank of E4, you can wear it, right? And the history of it was the Battle of Tripoli, right? Chapultepec, yes. So the majority of the casualties were officers and NCOs. So that's why you wear the blood stripe when you get the E4. But then when you think about it, they were leading from the front and they left no one to lead the troops. So now the mentality of the Marine Corps is everyone's a leader. Everyone's a rifleman. And even down from when you're an E3, you know, you make E4, you go through the corporal's course, you go through the sergeant's course. It kind of shifted the mentality of leadership. You know, back then, like history shows, it was officers in the front, the NCOs in the front. But then what happened when they were all wiped out, which happened in the Battle of Chapultepec, it shifted that leadership ideology. And now you're leading from within. And you look at that in the breakdown of like an infantry platoon, right? Down to your rifle squad. You got an E3 leading a rifle squad, and maybe an E4, and you're talking about an 18-year-old, maybe fresh out of high school, but that's what now that leadership ideology is, leading from within. There's still a hierarchy, but officers are relying on those enlisted men. I mean, you look at Quantico, right? And we have a friend who became an officer, and he always gives me crap because he's like, well, I outrank you. I'm a Marine Corps officer. I said, but what was the rank of the instructors that taught you to be an officer?
Yes, true.
It's E5s and E6s. It's enlisted men that train and create Marine Corps officers. So there's something to be said about that. And I don't know about the other branches. I can't speak for them. Not even the Army, even though I was in the Army Reserves. But you can see that shift in ideology in the Marine Corps, which, yes, I'm a little partial to the Marine Corps because, it was best times in my life, best job I ever had.
Hey, easy.
Look, you can say the same thing about the IDF. I'm quoting freaking Fury. You can't get on me on that. When they're in the tank, best job I ever had.
I never watched it. I should watch it.
Are you? Hold on. Whoa.
It was okay.
It's Brad Pitt, and I could not see him as a military guy.
I bought it, and I watch it at least once a month.
Well, if we agree with you, we'd all be wrong.
If we all agreed, no one would be thinking.
That's a narcissist right there.
Who said that? If everyone's agreeing, then no one's thinking.
Patient.
Who said that? Military leader.
Patton.
Very good.
I said that.
You said Peyton.
Well,
Peyton Manning.
Hebrew.
Yeah, we don't know Peyton. Peyton played sports. Patton was a Army general.
I know there's a PAT there, and it's hard to pronounce it because you guys have different rules for every single letter.
Yeah,
it is inconsistent.
Everyone agrees that no one is thinking.
All right. Well, but to your point, and I'm using the IDF as an example, right? Same thing. We have an unproportional number of high-ranking officers that are killed in action because they're not leading from a war room back in a safe place. They're there with the troop. Right now, again, they're not ahead of the troops; they're with the troops, right?
Yeah, that's different. That's different.
Yeah, but Israeli military not being very big, and everybody goes in at 18. So your lieutenant may be 19 and a half, your major may be 20. But the idea is that it's a very short age difference, and you go into battle with a lieutenant colonel who may be in his mid to late 20s. So we're not talking about. Yeah, but he's there with you. He's there with you in the hole, fighting the same war you're fighting. And he's not telling you what to do. He's not directing from the front or behind or anywhere else. He's right there alongside you. And that is a lesson that
I experienced that in the National Guard, where I had an 18-year-old lieutenant. Now they made me think, I wish I knew his name because I would love to throw him props. Because, they have, in America, you have J. ROTC and ROTC. So you could be in junior high school and training to become an officer and then become an officer right after high school. And that's what I had in the National Guard. But I give credit to this young man because he
hold on, Steve, hold on. Because you're all frozen. And as much as I love you, I hate doing this remotely, which we are today. But I can't understand a word you're saying. Try again.
Am I there?
Don't worry about it.
It
probably wasn't important anyways, what you were about to say.
Delegation.
Can you hear me now?
So you're messing up what I'm saying.
Move away from the microphone. Move away from the microphone.
If you delegate to your junior guys and girls, it's amazing how you give them that confidence and delegation. It takes a little bit off you. I know anytime I'm a supervisor or person in my chain of command say, I need you to go do this, I felt this sense of responsibility to make sure that I didn't let them down. And I think that made me better at it because I want to make sure that I'm doing my part for the success of whatever we're doing at the moment. And giving younger subordinates or people in maybe junior leadership positions those little wins, little bits of confidence. And I know that I take that, if they're going to trust me to do a job, that's going to motivate me to make sure I'm not doing anything half-assed.
I had an unofficial tab that I had made that I would award officers. when they got into certain incidents, and it just said pipe hitter on it. It wasn't a department sanctioned award or anything like that, but it was like internal. It became our thing. And if they got into a significant use of force, and they did well, they got the pipe hitter award. And it became like this thing, and everyone loved it. And I would make trophies. You guys know I do woodwork. So every time there was a significant incident, I would make them a trophy. Like I had one kid recover a stolen, what are those mini cars, whatever that BMW makes?
Mini Cooper?
Yeah. So he got into a foot pursuit chase, did a great job. Yeah. But I happen to have a toy Mini Cooper, painted it gold, made a trophy for him, and I gave it to him. And a couple years later, he tells me, he goes, that's the best award I've ever received. Like just being recognized for that, because he wasn't going to get an award for that, although he did a great job. It was those little things. I love doing that. And they loved it, like just to give credit to what you're saying, like, hey, that was a great job.
Well, versus getting something, not to knock any of the Chiefs awards and so forth, but the Chief is just doing what somebody else gave him information and he acted on.
Right.
Versus the supervisor who knows what you did. To me, that means much more to get an attaboy from my direct supervisor who was there versus it going up through the command chain.
And every institution's different, because you look at Israel, and BK always says this, they don't give awards because they expect everybody to perform to their highest. You get a pin for your schools and your achievements and your campaigns that you served in, and correct me if I'm wrong, BK, but or their equivalent of the Medal of Honor, but you're not going to get the achievement award or this and that, because they expect everybody to achieve, and that's
your job.
Like, yeah, it's your job. Exactly. And unfortunately, and I don't know what it is like now, I'm only speaking to when I was there, the award system was not, there was no integrity to it. Anybody could put themselves in for an award, and I had a leader who put himself in. Let me retract. He wasn't a leader. He was a manager. He was an enigma throughout my whole career. But he put himself in for every award he could put in, and he got it.
Steve, we're losing it.
We can never lose.
It's always these good stories that we miss. We miss you on the good stories, and then we get your frozen face on the screen.
Well, unofficial award. When I was in the Marines, we had I was on our personnel carrier called Amtrak, and we were out in 29 Palms at a combined arms exercise at CAX one year. And we had one track that just was a constant mechanical issue. And whenever we had the end of the exercise or the index, I don't know who in the chain of command did this, but they bought a dildo, painted it gold, broke it in half, and mounted it on a piece of wood. And it's called the Broke Dick Award. And at company formation, they presented it to this guy. And it was comical. It was a good morale booster. But I was like, if I was that crew chief, that would be one of my proudest achievements.
100%.
If for no other reason, the fact that you can share in your glories and failures.
And you took your time to do that for me.
Somebody took the time out to do that. And again, time. Getting to know your guys and girls. I went to a leadership course that all they talked about was knowing what your subordinates are going through. And I don't mean subordinates in a negative way at all.
I know. I hate that word, but it's the word we use.
Who's going through problems at home, who's going through some kind of alcohol abuse, whatever the thing is that they're battling. If you can come to your supervisor and go, look, I'm having this problem, and it's okay, I got you. Instead of like, well, I'm going to have to report this to professional standards.
Right.
That's totally different versus the person who's like, I'm going to help carry you through this. And I'm going through that right now. And many people go through that. And those that don't do it alone are the lucky ones, because they've got people that they've garnered. I don't say garnered relationships, but you've got somebody that's looking out for you as a supervisor. That makes you want to look out for them in terms of, okay, what does the team need? Okay, I'll stay an hour late, or I'll come in an hour early, or I'll take that assignment so so-and-so can go to the birth of their child, or whatever the case may be. And as everybody knows that they're looking out for each other and they've got support whenever they need it, be it big or small. Right. And again, you can't teach that. Right. I keep harping on that.
Well, I don't think we can teach that. I think you can enhance it significantly.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think of myself looking historically, pre-military, post-military, that I had the leadership skills. So it's not something that would have come naturally. And there's certainly tools that are taught. But as far as the general attitude or aptitude towards leadership, I do agree with you. That is something someone has or doesn't have. I know we're losing Steve, and this is a good conversation, and I would much rather continue this in person on good Wi-Fi. So I think this is a good point to stop. And
Starlink.
What?
I thought you had Starlink.
I do have Starlink. I'm not using it at the moment. I need to figure that thing out. I need Elon Musk to come and help me because plug in, connect to app. Now I tried using it once and it didn't work very well, so I need to figure that out. But anyways, I think this is a good place to stop. And Paul is actually going to be coming back, and we'll be hanging out for a while longer. So
If we can
if
get the range on Saturday,
I'm all about it.
But I'm thinking maybe next Sunday we can continue this and continue recording and moving on to some more leadership lessons that we would like to share with our listeners.
Yes, because I think we're going to run with this for a little bit.
Yep, but you can't run with something if I can't hear you. So that makes it difficult.
You look like this.
Which we are used to seeing you like that. And on that note, thank you, Paul, for coming and playing. Thank you, Steve, for send it. That's our new Siri command. Anyways, we'll pick this up next week. Thank you, Steve, for joining us remotely. All right, good talk.
Bye, Frozen Steve.
Bye, Frozen Steve. Later, Paul. Bye.